recording to the cloud, and we are live on YouTube as well. Go ahead, Brandy.
Welcome to our next Trailblazer conversation, Amit Pradhan. He is the president of SVBS, chairman of Rainfall. Today's talk is going to be around impact NFTs. The talk explores ideas around impact NFTs and how the market meme could be used for solving more meaningful challenges than just the 69 million piece of digital art. This is a very poignant time for this conversation to be having. Thank you so much for being here, Amit.
Well, thank you very much. Let me know if you can see my screen, and hopefully you can.
Yep,
awesome.
We can.
Yes.
Well, it is a real pleasure to be here again. Obviously the conversations, the people who are part of these conversations here are just absolutely incredible people, not just because of the work they do, but because of the purpose of why they do it. And that is really a core part of the evolution of the entire tech space. And we've seen this in the world of AI and its intersection or the interplay with the world of IoT and blockchain. And we're now seeing it with the evolution of what I think is a great meme name. I think NFTs are an unfortunate name for what they represent and the opportunity they represent. It's kind of like starting to talk about the internet in terms of HTTP or TCP/IP. I think we'll make the evolution to starting to use the terminology that makes it far more appealing to the mainstream. But if you really think about the more recent surge of this conversation around NFTs, it began with the big sales, obviously the 69.5 million sale by Beeple, was the big conversation starter. But there's a really interesting story. Some of you have probably heard this, read this, about the artist named Johnny Lemercier, French artist, incredible studio, does a lot of three-dimensional art, and turned into an environmentalist, very, very focused about the climate. And what you see on the screen is the kind of art that you can see in his studio. He got on to the NFT train and created these 5 three-dimensional objects that were sold in an NFT. It sold within, I believe it was 10 seconds, everything was sold. Very exciting, until he found out that the amount of energy, 8.7, I believe, kilowatts of energy that was used just for the first sale, and then not accounting for all the subsequent sales of the NFTs that would take place later, ended up being the amount of energy that would power his physical studio for over 2 years. Very exciting, but she was obviously not impressed, right? And he's a climate activist himself. And so, this was a huge issue, and it's an issue that we've, seen come up with crypto in multiple ways. And oftentimes, the conversation then ends up being just about that, right? How do we make NFTs, or how do we make Bitcoin in general more friendly towards the planet? And it becomes an energy discussion. And I think that's important. And I think that the criticism is fair as well. But at over $1 trillion equivalent right now as an asset class, crypto in general, I think that it's an unfair focus. And if we really think about where we want to take this conversation into the future, I love Buckminster Fuller's quote: "We are called to be the architects of the future, not its victims." And so if you're able to get past just the energy conversation, and you have incredible projects, in the earlier chat, Dan mentioned some of the work they're doing with powering a lot of mining with green energy. We're seeing this across different projects across the world. We're going to do a better job of addressing that. But what we need to look at is the real underlying opportunity that NFTs represent. And to me, they're not just the opportunities of the creators. It's incredible. You're going to have creators of all sorts. The democratization of creators. It's people who are graffiti artists somewhere, people who are taking incredible photographs, people who are indie painters and musicians and people producing videos. And this is incredible, right? And this is just the first part. I think all of the marketplaces that we're looking at right now represent this first part. There is an entire industry that's going to be built around this, because for many of these pieces of art, it's not just going to be a question of can that art be sold one time. It's about what licensing models can be built into that art and how they can be spread around, thereby creating an entire economy around access to this art. There's the other side of this, right? Which is the side of who's buying this art. And in many ways, this is what I refer to as the commons opportunity or the commons revolution, right? If you look at what happened with protest movements like Black Lives Matter and Greta's, climate battle and Wall Street bets, and then if you look at solution protest movements like Bitcoin, now NFTs, and decentralized finance, they're all just separate vectors of the same commons revolution. And this commons revolution is really interesting because the individuals can come in and support the kind of artists that they want to support, either by thematic, either because they know them, either by community, by categories of gender or sexual preference, minorities of all sorts. People supporting, Black artists or Latinx artists. It's incredible what this has unlocked, and it is incredible how an industry can be created around supporting these artists. But here's the thing about NFTs, right? Mark Twain is often used for every quote possible. And as he once said, the reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. If only my death certificate was an NFT. And that really comes down to understanding the opportunity around NFTs, right? Like I said before, I think NFT is a terrible meme name. In reality, it is a programmable digital representation of either a physical, a hybrid, or a native digital asset on chain that is entirely unique, right? And so you can start thinking about what can be represented as an NFT. It's not just, a particular building or a home or a watch or art. We can start thinking about some really interesting models to unlock using this momentum that NFTs have created. So let's think about the most obvious one, right? It's always been kind of this lot of investors that has had the opportunity and has set direction for the kind of companies, founders, products, creators that get invested in. And the criteria often are sharp criteria. What is the return? How quickly can we get it? And I really don't care what happens. Already, tokenization has started to change those models, not quickly enough, but there's a whole bunch of things that we're starting to unlock that tokenization brings. Hopefully, we can step away from this model, right? And we can start unlocking and untapping some really unique new models for how NFTs can be leveraged and leveraged for impact. So let's think about the context of impact. In general, we want to help create a better planet for our wonderful host, for the cities that we live in, and for all the self-sovereign individuals that live there, right? And so let's start unpacking what the opportunities are from an impact perspective. The first one I would say is what I call the 2% law. About 5 years ago, India had a new law that was passed that required all public companies that make at least $120 million in net profit to spend 2% of that on CSR, ESG, sustainability, impact, whatever you want to call it. The idea was, how do we make this a better community? That law has been very successful. Billions and billions of dollars have been unlocked for very important projects. And over time, it will become, I think, a blueprint that other countries would use. But what's really cool is that you can start applying similar traits to what we do with Nifties. And so there's an interesting project by Alexandra Pittman. She just sent me some details today. Actually, if you're in the online right now, hello to you. She's with Impact Mapper, and she is starting to create this model where programmatically percentage of sales of NFTs as selected by artists can then go towards, important projects, nonprofits, charities, different organizations that are trying to work with the poorest of the populations around the world. We're doing something very interesting with Rainfall as well, and I'll touch upon that in a bit. I think there's a really interesting opportunity for a financial investment product. That's my background. It's where I live a lot in the investment world. The difference between an LP unit or a share or a digital share and an NFT is that an NFT has to be unique, right? A share can be digital, but a share is like any other share and it can be exchanged for another share. And that actually is great on one hand, but on the other hand, it's limiting because you can't, as the person putting the money in, literally define what you want it to do, right? So there's a lot of opportunities to start creating impact funds where the investors in those impact funds, not just institutional, not just accredited, but those investors could be all of those people who are investing in NFTs today, the commons revolution. And you could have investment shares, if you may, or units that have programmable specificity of what they're investing in and what the outcomes are that they expect from that. And so you can now imagine an impact fund that invests through NFTs that people can buy into, and those NFTs can be focused on climate or equality or a particular project. And the ability to give people the power to make those decisions, I think takes NFTs from just the conversation of, look, we're going to support, the individual artist, to going to a point where now we can actually say, hey, look, we can use this instrument to start investing in causes, projects, founders that are going to solve for the big problems. There's a huge opportunity to create, and this is something that we've been working on, to create impact, staking, and validation entities and projects. Because one of the things that will be required as we move forward is to think about a blockchain that is not just Ethereum, and already we're starting to see a lot of nifty projects on Tezos and Cardano, but eventually you want to make sure that you have validators and staking investors who are going to support the validators that are going to support the custom NFT funds, or the 2% or 4% or 5% allocators from the NFTs. And now you can really have the commons revolution, push the market in the direction that we want to go. And finally, thinking about specific impact nifties, right? So let's take the example of this one thing that has been the scourge of global society for the past year and a half. COVID and the vaccines that we're trying so hard to get out to the rest of the world. We've all heard about what's happening in India right now. And it would be really interesting if we could have a programmable nifty that represented X number of doses of vaccines delivered successfully to Y community. And it would be unique because it's not something that you can just exchange, but the value that represents can go well beyond art. And it will require some thinking and it will require some unpacking. But when I think of impact NFTs, to me, it is far greater than just thinking about art and what art can unlock for us. Uh, as I look to start winding up, I want to give one quick example as we think about the concept of what else can impact NFTs do beyond art. Dan mentioned this project earlier, Rainfall, that we've been working on for a little while. Its whole purpose is to be able to unlock human value from a digital footprint. And that value is represented in the form of intelligence, which is unique. That intelligence can be represented as a nifty for either an individual person or groups of people. And people can actually buy into that nifty, where the value then goes back to the people, including kids in sub-Saharan Africa who are still putting out data points. And so in winding up, I would love to just summarize the idea that nifties for art are fantastic. And they have created this incredible commons revolution, both on the creator side and on the investor side. And I think the real opportunity going forward is taking the lessons we've learned and applying it to other unique assets that can make a substantial, meaningful difference to the planet we live on, because we can support the kind of projects and entrepreneurs who are using these principles to make this a better world. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions and jump into any details if anyone wants to unpack what we've covered.
Thank you so much. I'm asking for comments to be posted into the chat. We are shifting a little bit of gears over here. So I'm going to take over the Adrian position as moderator for the questions and come in and honor everyone who posts, just for time's sake, because we will be moving into our next interview with Tim. Amit, you and I have so much alignment here. I'm representing Younga Forum, which is for the SDG goals. We took over the United Nations with this type of new monetization where the youth can have the NFT and then activate that into their projects. And so it's very important, we're shifting and having you be the voice of that shift would be powerful. So using these instruments and being able to have it tracked and have a full circle 360 economy is important. So the question here is, are you testing it currently? And what project are you testing it with?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, like I mentioned with Rainfall, we're underway with testing it. We're starting to assemble the different pieces. So assembling validators who are willing to be, focused impact validators, the top impact investors who are willing to stake or back these validators, right? Making sure that we have the kind of projects that are willing to create the 2, 4, 5% allocations to the most important causes. We're building that into Rainfall as well. We're starting to see all of those pieces start to come together. And one of the projects that we're looking at is the example I gave of the vaccines, where investors can actually go in and say the nifty that represents the value of, or the capital required to deliver 100,000, 1 million vaccines to a particular area with all of the conditions programmed in, becomes a really great example of a non-art nifty. And so we're exploring all of these options, because sometimes you have to use the memes, you have to use the narrative, right, which consumes 95% of the oxygen, but maybe represents 5% of the market, to actually represent 95% of the market. And this is one of those opportunities.
Mm. Are there other companies right now that are exploring this that you're familiar with? I know that you're mentioning Rainfall, and are there any other names that you could share with us for research and development side?
Yeah, I'll be happy to drop a list your way, and if you want to share it with everyone. It's early stages, right? Everyone who's looking at Nifties is looking at it from an art perspective, which is fantastic. It's a great obvious use case, but I would just encourage everyone to think about what sits behind the definition of that Nifty, right? And the fact that you can have a programmable, unique digital representation on chain of an asset, either a physical asset or a native digital asset, unlocks incredible amount of opportunities beyond art.
Mhm. Absolutely. We are re-examining the importance of our unique ID and being a creator of mission-driven purpose in our world, that everything has a reason. And so this is our transformational shift. And I've always seen it in that way. We'll be dropping the first global youth NFT marketplace in October for this to take place. And this is within Alliance Partners of the United Nations and the SDGs. So it'll be a happy day when we can sit down and play. Thank you so much. If there's any other questions, we're about to come into our next portion of our show. If anyone wants to drop their questions into the chat, please do, and we'll make sure they get answered. I see that Molly is here.
Yeah, I have a question. Amit, and I apologize, I didn't get to hear all of it, but I wanted to see how it's going for you on your trip.
Oh, very well. Now, if it's a physical trip, then it's going really well. If you're asking Dan Mapes, that trip is not always just physical, right? It's metaphysical. No, it's going really well. And, like I said earlier, Switzerland always brings back memories of, our collective time back there. It was, phenomenal. And just so you know, next year is back on as of now. And we are going to be there again. And so please keep your, last week of January reserved for what we're going to be doing. And obviously we up to the next level now. So, it's going great. And it's a very interesting last point I'll make, even from an opportunity perspective, investors and companies as well. I've been doing a lot of work in the Swiss ecosystem because a lot of the regulatory framework is already well placed to support what's happening in the Nifty space, which is evolving in the US. I think, we're going to see a regulatory framework between the SEC, FINRA, CFTC, and the IRS, kind of evolve. They haven't figured out how they're going to treat Nifties yet. It's much further along here. And so for companies that have, big projects that they're already pursuing and are unsure of what happens with both the legal and the tax frameworks, happy to chat with them and share all of the learnings of being here and, seeing and working with some of the leaders in the space over here, because it really does allow projects to accelerate in ways that they couldn't earlier.
Oh, Amit, that is such a beautiful update. I'm excited for us all to be together. Yeah, we're ready. Oh, we're getting the cue. We're going to move to our next speaker. Thank you so much for your time. Brandy, if you want to introduce our next person, let me just quickly thank you so much, Amit. That was fabulous. I'm going to stop the recording really quick.